So, Kristen, how long have I known you for? Oh my
That is
goodness.
a really good question. I know that we met each other like right when our kids were born. My kid's a year older than yours, right? Mine
Yeah,
is
yeah.
going to be
Was I
13 and
still
yours is.
pregnant when I met you?
Yes, you were pregnant because you came into that startup I was working at. It was called, oh,
I
shoot, I
forget.
can't remember what it was called. It doesn't
Yeah,
exist anymore. So, but yeah, you came in to talk to us about like consulting for us or something like that. And you were very, very pregnant. I remember
yeah.
that.
And I also
Yes.
remember you were wearing white jeans, and I thought they were cool.
Oh my God. That's
It's
hilarious
a
because
very specific memory.
was I really? Yeah,
Yeah.
because I would not probably be wearing white jeans these days, but that is very interesting.
Yeah. But, I think that what is really interesting is you seemed like a really cool person and I wanted to get to know you more. And maybe it's superficial, but I remember thinking that, oh, you must be into the same things that I or similar things or something. And so,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, were you doing the coveted at the time in IFB?
yeah.
The
And
coveted in
yeah,
IFB
independent
and
fashion
like
bloggers. Yeah.
independent
And
fashion bloggers. Yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, yeah, based on that and the fact that you were willing to come into the office, like I think you were like 8.5 months pregnant or something. I was
Yeah.
like, she's a badass.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh my God. The working mom. Yeah. No, it was crazy. I know. And it's really cool to see that, we've stayed friends over the years. And,
Yeah.
I think a lot about how style and friendship kind of come together because I think ultimately clothes are partially self-expression, partially communication with people, and I just think it's so interesting how clothes can play a role in our relationships. And so
I think that's super fascinating too. And it's, and I mean, we talked about it a lot in your case, every time every time you've had a big change in your life, it's been because of the way you dressed or or your your personal style has had a big influence on these big changes in your life. And yeah, it's just further evidence that it's never just clothes. It's never just fashion.
no,
It's
yeah, it's an
communication.
external indicator of how you're feeling internally. And I think that that's why Danielle Bayard Jackson is this amazing person that I've known on TikTok for years and years and years. And she is a friendship expert, and I was just so excited to get her to come onto the show so we could talk just about this.
I'm so excited because yeah, and just in a recent episode we talked about how like the simple act of saying like, "Oh my God, I love your shoes" or "I love your sweater" has turned into like an actual long-term friendship. And maybe like my white jeans were why we're still friends right now.
Maybe. Yeah, well, that's
Who
how it
knew?
started. So yeah,
Yeah.
so let's go talk to Danielle, because I think that is going to have a lot of really cool insights.
I'm super excited.
Hi, welcome to the Closet Philosophy Podcast. This is Jennine. I'm a personal stylist.
And this is Kristen. I'm a fashion writer, and we're here to uncover the ways that your personal style is so much more than just clothes.
Whether you realize it or not, what you wear touches on science, psychology, culture, politics, and so much more. This week on Closet Philosophy, we're stepping outside of the closet, but staying deep with a conversation that's not about clothes, but still very much about fit. We're joined by Danielle Bayard Jackson, a relational health educator, speaker, and the author of the new book, Fighting for Our Friendships, the science and art of conflict and connection in women's relationships. Danielle brings both heart and hard data to the table, offering an aerial view of how female friendships actually work, why they thrive, why they fracture, and how we can actually repair them. She served as a former spokesperson and research consultant for Bumble for Friends, and her insights have been featured everywhere from NBC News to the New York Times to Psychology Today, which, if you ask me, is the holy trinity of I know what I'm talking about. So, if you've ever found yourself wondering why female friendships can feel so confusing or how to approach conflict without turning into an emotional possum, you're going to want to hear this one. So, let's get into it. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to dive into this topic. It's so important.
So yeah, I'd love to start out by getting a little bit of your backstory. So can you tell our listeners how you got into becoming an expert in women's relationships?
Yeah, I often joke that, this certainly wasn't on my vision board when I was 10, but I started out as a high school English teacher, and I then climbed my way up to the academic chair of the department. And between class and after school, it was the number one thing that the girls in my class wanted to talk about was friendship stuff. And I kind of had a front row seat into the ways that issues of connection and belonging directly impacted everything else, whether they came to school, their attitude, their confidence in raising their hand. If they didn't like somebody, then they either didn't want to come to class or they didn't want to work together. So I was seeing almost like I had my own sociological lab, kind of what these dynamics look like. And when I left the classroom, I got into public relations, and I made the foolish mistake of thinking, oh, well, I'm working with adults, so I am leaving that teenage drama behind. And I learned very quickly that in spite of the fact that I'm working with these charismatic, high achieving women, that behind closed doors, they too secretly had issues navigating dynamics with other women. And I just was like, I wonder, are there studies on this stuff? Like, why do we do these things? And lo and behold, there were. And so for the past 8 years, I've dedicated my career to studying what the latest research has to say about women's cooperation, communication, and conflict.
Wow. That is an amazing place to start. Like, girls in high school. I have a daughter who is currently in middle school.
Mm.
And I can see how that would be such a perfect like laboratory to figure out what's going on in the female brain in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like, I mean, how are female relationships different from like male relationships?
Yeah, let me first anchor the conversation in saying that, even though I like to cite these really interesting studies, no study is reflective of every single individual, okay? But it does give us some interesting insights into certain tendencies that different groups have. And for male and female friendships, same-sex friendships, we do see a lot of differences. The first is that we see that women tend to be closer to their friends emotionally than men. Now, this might not surprise us. A lot of us probably know that anecdotally, but the idea is that because of how much we share with each other and the content of what we're sharing, so they find that women are more likely than men to talk about issues of mental health, physical health, work, family, all these things center the self. Men in their conversations are more likely than women to talk about sports and current events. These things decenter the self. So women get really, really close in their relationships, but their friendships are also very fragile. So they dissolve at a higher rate than men's friendships. So this is typically where people will say, oh, well, that's because, women, they're so petty. And the theory is that this happens not because women are just so petty or whatever it is, but if you are distant from someone the way a man might be, let's say emotionally and intimately in his friendships, then you can be somebody's friend easily for 40 years. We talk 3 times a year. We talk about the game. I can call myself your best friend for 40 years easily. But when I'm inviting a woman in, and the research does show that we tend to integrate our friends into our lives to the degree of a sibling, men to the degree of a cousin. Okay. So if I'm bringing you in as my sister, you are with me spiritually. We're helping raise kids together. You know about my health troubles and my money troubles. There's more opportunity for friction because you're all up in my biz. Okay. And so that's one of the largest differences is in how we socialize, how we relate to one another, even though at the end of the day, we all desire, companionship, belonging, and connection.
Wow. That's like really interesting. So it's like women are a lot close, like a lot more emotionally closer than men are with relationships. And so, yeah, I have a son and I ask him what he talks about with his friends and he says like, oh, just soccer. And like, and it sounds so different from Kristen's daughter's experience with her friends as well. And so I saw that you were recently on the Mel Robbins podcast, and she asked like a really interesting question. And I think that it really serves to have our listeners hear the answer to that question here as well, because I think that it'll really lay the groundwork for talking about friendships and style. So, like, you have this framework where you call it like the three affinities that are parts of female friendships. Like, can you elaborate on this?
Yeah. So as I was looking into that data, once I left public relations and got into this space, it didn't matter if I was looking at something from the world of anthropology, psychology. I started to notice these themes, and this is over the past 6 years. Everything started to point to three things that make women feel really, really close to one another. Now, I am not saying that men don't also value these things. I am saying women prioritize these three things. And when they're not there, it's the beginning of tension. So, those three things that women tend to prioritize in their same sex friendships are symmetry, secrecy, and support. So, symmetry are these feelings of sameness, which we all to some degree want in a friendship, but feelings of sameness and balance and egalitarianism, meaning we're all equal here. So, whereas men kind of roast each other or there's a lot of status seeking sometimes, we don't do very well with that. Okay. Then we have support. The research tells us the number one thing women look for in their same sex friendships is emotional help. So that means if I'm not getting anything else here, I expect that as another woman, you're going to make me feel like you have my back. Now, of course, the issues there become when you don't articulate what support looks like because you say, well, I mean, you're a woman, you should know. If we're friends, I shouldn't have to say it, right? So there's some of that going on. And then finally, secrecy, which doesn't necessarily refer to literal secrets, even though we're all familiar with that universal image of two little girls whispering in each other's ears, but like the essence of it. So the idea is that you and I are in this mutually exclusive vaults. It's me and you. And in the vault, we share. I share, you share. Issues arise when I feel like you're sharing outside the vault, telling my business, or if I feel like you're sharing big things with other people first. If you tell another friend about the pregnancy, the health scare, the breakup, I begin questioning how close we are. I question if you don't trust me, even though I know intellectually you can have other friends. But because we see that as such the glue of women's friendship, mutual self-disclosure, that becomes a key element of those relationships as well.
Wow. Yeah. I have other questions. Like I have so many other questions, but Kristen, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
I'm like, I don't mean to be raising my hand. Um, well, I maybe we should dive into the style and friendship
Yeah.
portion of it.
Okay, so like a couple of things. So like I before we started recording, I told you about the poll that I did in my stories where I asked women, I think like 95% of my followers are women. And so like I asked people, you want to feel good in your outfits so that you can. And then I asked, like get a new job, get a raise, launch your business, meet new people, make content online, just like a bunch of options. And 53%, so more than half of the people said that they wanted to feel good in their outfits so that they can meet new people. And, like I work with women who want to feel like themselves when they walk into a room, whether it's a networking event or a casual hangout. But in your research, how do first impressions, including what we wear, impact how new friendships begin?
Yeah, we've all seen the stuff on first impressions and even some of the sayings around, the impact that it can have. And it has an impact in a lot of different ways, not just in how people perceive us, but in how we show up, right? Especially with our style, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But if I feel a certain way in my body and in my clothes when I'm meeting another person, that's indirectly going to impact the way that I engage. Whether quite literally I'm kind of like fussy over my clothes and pulling and tugging, or if I'm trying to kind of signal something about who I am. And so style plays a big role in first impressions, and we know first impressions play a big role in relationships and our reception of one another. I often joke that when it comes to friendships start with rapport, and rapport begins with hello. I
Mhm.
mean, we got to take baby steps. And so even though people tend to say, well, it doesn't matter, I should just be authentically me and I just want to show up however, whenever. And sometimes I talk to people and sometimes I don't. And then they also have big, lofty goals for friendship. I just want people who are values aligned and like minded. That's very noble. I want that for myself too. Also, though, how do I show up on the day to day? And not to put pressure on the day to day, but friendship starts with rapport, and rapport begins with hello. So, what mental space am I in when I'm saying hello? How do I pull people in with, a smile or confidently articulating myself and with humor and playfulness? That stuff matters.
Yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of times too, it's like your clothes reflect your values and, what you prioritize. And so, like, I always tell people it's like you're sending out like a bat signal as to what you're about by what you're wearing. And like other people pick up on that, like I would probably gravitate towards someone who put some thought into their outfit more likely than, I mean, if they had a good vibe about them, I'm not just making a blanket statement, but like if they had a good vibe and they also had a cool outfit, I would probably have a reason to come up to them and say like, hey, like I like your jacket or your shoes or something like that. And that usually opens up the conversation for like connection.
Oh,
Yeah, and that
absolutely. Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to mention that in our previous episode, or well, in the Shira Gill episode, I should say, the organizer, we both found situations where or maybe all three of us, where we met a good friend because we were like, oh, I like your shirt or I like your shoes, like that actually turned into a valuable friendship just from that opening.
I'm not surprised to hear that at all. We did a survey of over 230 women, and 90% of them said that compliments are the way that they try to connect with a woman they don't know, is to just tell her you like something. And so, like, if we kind of work backwards, all right, well, if that's the way that most women are trying to connect, what are ways that I can make it easier for them by wearing something that a person would remark on because it looks a little unusual, or the way that I combine something, or even if it's like we talked about, like even carrying around the book that you're reading. I mean, that I cannot tell you how many times people are just saying to me, oh, what are you reading? I mean, like a server at a restaurant. And to me, that shows people want to connect. I think we are so fearful of being rejected and kind of self centered a little bit. We all are. And we're thinking, I don't want to be rejected. I think we fail to realize that other people feel that way too. And so, if other people are also nervous about being rejected or put off, how can I make it easier for you? How can I
Mhm.
signal to you that you'd be welcome here and you wouldn't be turned away? So I could do things to help other people out, but I have to believe that other people want to connect with me. Can I wear funky earrings? Can I style things in a way that are maybe a little unexpected? Can I carry around a little trinket or a water bottle? I mean, it's simple, but I have seen that be an invitation to people who are looking for a reason to connect, and it makes it easier for them.
Yeah. I mean, people that get really scared about like approaching new people to see if they want to hang out. Like I remember like when my son was in preschool and there was like a cool mom at the preschool, I was like, I felt like I was like asking somebody on a date. It was like really like I felt really vulnerable. Like say like, hey, do you want to go get coffee? Say yes.
Yeah, I actually hear that all the time. People will say, gosh, after listening to you, it kind of feels like friendship is like dating. And, I think to some degree it does. And maybe it's because we have so much language wrapped around our romantic partner, what to do to catch somebody's eye, and what there's so much conversation around strategy and putting yourself out there. But we continue this narrative that friendship should just be easy, natural, and organic. So if you have to like think through it, or what's wrong with you, it should be so easy and simple, but it's not. So let's also have conversations around, okay, how do I position myself? How do I make a great first impression? How do I get momentum once we do click and have that initial chemistry? Let's create the same space to have in-depth conversations around friendship, the same way that we've got 60 books on our shelves around how to bag a partner, so I love that so much of this conversation is happening in the public discourse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vis-a-vis your poll, Janine, I just wanted to like kind of skip ahead because there was a question that reminded me of that poll that people are dressing a certain way because they want to meet someone. And I think it was on your Instagram, Danielle. I was listening to some of your videos, and one of the things I thought was super interesting was that something about, I think it was actually a study that found that the best way to deepen your friendships is not necessarily to meet new people. It's not about volume. It might be more about improving the friendships that you already have. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that sort of disconnect between like making more and more and more friends and in like heightening the quality of the friendships that you already have.
Okay, I first of all, this could be like a whole freaking course. Okay. All I'll say for now is yes, I think a lot of people when they are experiencing loneliness or disconnection, our first thought is, you know what, I've got to meet some new people. I need new people. I need fresh blood in my circle. Sometimes it might be true, but there are three types of loneliness. And I think a lot of us might be misdiagnosing which one we have. So the first is intimate loneliness. That means you are not intimately known by someone. For most people, this might be satisfied by a best friend or a romantic partner. Then there's relational loneliness, so lacking friendships. People who know me, I know them, we have a good rapport. And then there's collective loneliness, so feeling like you don't belong to something greater than yourself. A lot of people have this satisfied by volunteering or a religious or spiritual group or something like that. And it reminds me, I'm a part of something bigger. And so a lot of times we just are like, I need more people. I need more people. Well, maybe for you, the disconnection is that you are performing in all of the relationships that you have. You have plenty of people. Let's start. What does it look like to start leaning into who you are and feathering out your personality a little bit? What experiences might you now have with people who already know you and like you, right? So we can kind of look at what it looks like. Do I need more people, or do I need to try to find ways to enhance the relationships with people I already know? But, we can have new people in our lives and they don't necessarily all have to be close buddies. Sociologists refer to this as loose ties or weak ties, but these are people you're not necessarily super close with, but they add a lot of value to our lives. They add texture to our overall friendship landscape. This is really random, but some studies find that you're more likely to find a job through somebody who's a weak tie because they have one foot in a different world and one foot in your world, right? So we need people who are kind of feathered out that we don't see a lot, but maybe we exchange resources, or joking with them once a month in the elevator at work provides a little mood boost and it just feels nice. And so when we're meeting new people, it can certainly be helpful to adding to our quota of social connection that we need for our health. But sometimes it's not the answer to the loneliness we might be experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And Kristen and I were talking about whether or not we should talk about this like on the podcast. And so, and I, it's like, so in the pandemic, and I'm sure that you have heard this time and time again, losing friendships like falling apart. And so, like, I had like a friend group and I was like close with them. We became friends. All our kids were born at the summer of 2013. And like, so we were like really tight. And then the pandemic happened. And so I've been friends with these people for like years. And then all of a sudden, like the pandemic happened, and then I wasn't friends with them. And I don't even know what happened. Like honestly, like and it took me a long time to get here, but I don't even take it personally anymore. Like, but it's like I spent a lot of time like alone because I didn't know how to go about meeting like new people outside of, being a mom.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that. And I think for a lot of us, it feels like one, our social networks feel like they shifted. And the research does show that our social networks shrank around 16%, which makes sense because for a lot of those weak ties, the way that we maintain them was being out and about, right? So if I'm not out, I'm not going to connect with you. So it did shrink. And then our relationships with friends did shift. I mean, it seems like forever ago, but there was so much happening. We had, the summer of 2020 with social justice. We're looking at each other's posts and we're like, I can't believe she believes that, and masking or not, and vaccines or not, and who you allow into your bubble of safety, for those who are taking it serious, making those choices, and others who were, there was so much shift in how we even saw each other. There was so much. So I'm not shocked to hear that that was disruptive to those relationships that were so important to you. And I think it also goes to show that as romantic as the notion as it is, sometimes it takes more than love. I can love my friends, but do I ever see you? And how do things change and different stressors in my life? And how do I manage this when I've got obligations at home? That's the reality of keeping this thing going in spite of my history with you and the affection I have for you. And that's just what it is. And I do think a lot of us got rusty. Our social muscles kind of atrophied. I think social anxiety, went up a little bit, especially at the beginning when we're coming out of that bubble. It's like, do we go outside? Do we not? Do we only eat on the patio? Can we go inside your house? I mean, so much of that had us anxious alone. And then we're just not bumping into people like we used to. So you don't get to really use those skills. And I think it's got a lot of people in a space now where they're ready to get back out there, but feeling socially anxious because it's been a long time since they've mingled, especially if you're a person who's worked from home for the past 4 years. So,
Yeah.
so I definitely feel you on that.
Yeah. I mean, and like I think that it was like really hard because like I'm an introvert. So for me, like I can literally spend like lots of time by myself and I'm like totally happy. But like one of the things that shifted for me of getting out of that funk was when I started getting dressed again and like leaving the house and
Mhm.
like getting dressed and going out into the world. And then all of a sudden, like because like what happened was like I decided to start like after like you remember me when I had like the
Mhm.
empathy and like the communication business that just I that just didn't work for me. And so I was like, okay, I was like mourning that kind of failure. And then to like, okay, what do I do now? And I was just like, I just need to make money. So I started reselling clothing. And so I was just getting out into the world like sourcing clothes and just wearing like leggings and a sweatshirt or just like not I'm just going to a thrift store. I'm not really don't need to really get dressed. And then like as I was accumulating all of these cool clothes, I was like, well, why don't I start wearing them? And then as soon as I started wearing the clothes, people started coming up to me and started asking me questions about clothes and started
Mm.
seeing me as a person who knew about style. And then I actually made friendships out of that. And I thought that that was like a really like powerful lesson in like just like showing up, not just showing up in nice clothes, but also like showing up for yourself and like in your authenticity.
That's really powerful. Shasta Nelson, she's one of the OGs in the friendship space. And she argues that there's like this triangle, she calls it frientimacy, of three things you need to feel close. So she says positivity is the first one. And I wonder if you sharing clothes and ideas and strategies and creative energy and stuff with other people, it's a positive, pleasurable experience, you guys being together. So you're hanging out, you're sharing ideas, you're giving fashion inspo, and it's simply fun. And I'm sorry, but friendship is an elective relationship. And so at the base of it, do we enjoy each other when we're together, right? The
Mhm.
second thing she says is consistency. So depending on these people, I wonder if the people you're getting close with, if they are in close proximity where you can hang out and connect and socialize, whether it's, online, but in person, if you guys are hanging out multiple times, there's lots of connection points that brings you close. And finally, vulnerability. And I would imagine, I'd be curious to hear what you think it was, but I would imagine if there was some vulnerability in these interactions as you continue to connect with them, because even with style, you're putting yourself out there in a certain way. If you all are sharing with each other, body issues around why you chose one shirt instead of the other, and I don't like my arms, and this is why I wear this and that, that's very tender. And I would imagine those things come up, or just the history of how you got into this. If you're sharing that with friends while you guys are swapping clothing ideas, I wonder if those three elements were a part of you getting closer to these people as you began to show up in the fullness and brightness of your style as you go out into the world. So, what was that experience for you? Why do you think? Because I'm sure it was just more than we both like clothes. Do you find that those three elements were there, or what was it that you think helped to foster those friendships with people you share this interest with?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there was, that positive feeling of like that creative juices and that kind of almost like the kind of also the shared experience of being like a reseller and like some of the
Mm.
struggles that happen and like trying to like exchange like information and things like that. But then like eventually, like I have this one friend that I, run into almost every time I go to the thrift store and like I call him a kid. He's like 28. Um, like, but I feel like he's like a son to me. Like, and I think I'm the same age as his parents. But like, we just eventually, like, over time, like, we started talking about our lives and like the things that we are actually going through and stuff. And so I know it's not like a female friendship necessarily, but I feel like it operates in a very similar way as like a female friendship, I would say in that regard. But like, just like running into like other women who are my age, and also that too is like, kind of coming into this idea of, once you enter midlife, you also encounter this kind of like invisibility in a
Mm,
sense. And
mm,
so, and like you're kind of like this shift happens where you become like invisible to men. And so, and like this is like kind of interesting because our whole lives we've been that's been like a big part of it. And then all of a sudden it's like become a very small part of how we move around the world. And some people take it to heart and are really sad about it, but other people think about it as a new freedom. And so, and
mm.
when you find like other women who see that freedom, like Kristen is like, yeah, me.
100%.
So I see it as a freedom. Like I see it. And when I see other
Yeah.
women who see it as a freedom, like I'm like, zoom, like I like zero in on them. And so, because I think I guess that goes into like the positivity in a sense,
Uh,
finding that freedom.
Yeah. I also feel like when you were describing that you were going to the thrift store wearing your sweats and everything, and then you shifted to dressing up. It seems like there's a vulnerability in that because you're dressing to be seen, and that is making yourself vulnerable, right? So that was an opening for people.
that
Yeah.
You know?
is so good. I'm just like sitting with that about how even just showing up visually in your clothing choices and how you dress yourself and present yourself to the world, that itself as a form of vulnerability because of being seen. Okay, first of all, we need to put that on a tote bag or something. That's so
Yeah.
good. And I think it continues to expand how we see vulnerability. I think a lot of times when we talk about being vulnerable, which is such a buzzword now, we do think of like sharing your trauma or, crying and hyperventilating in the corner. And those are highly charged, emotionally intense scenes. So we associate them with vulnerability. But vulnerability simply means taking a risk of rejection.
Hmm.
There's a chance here that once I do or say this thing, you are going to look at me differently.
Hmm.
And so saying, I'm going to show up in this style that makes me feel good and it's vibrant, and others might not get it or appreciate it or whatever, but it feels good to me is definitely a chance of rejection. But like we say, with all things that we can do that might bring rejection, it is just as possible that it brings acceptance because showing up like that, it almost expedites the process of finding your people. So often we want to blend in because we don't want the rejection. But if you're serious about finding your people, you might as well show up authentically so we can fast track those people who say, I love your style, I love your flow, oh my gosh, tell me more,
Hmm.
right? And that's who we're after. So I love that example.
Yeah. I mean, it's true though. I mean, because like once I made that shift from like sweatpants to clothes, you know, there was like the other group of people who were also in sweatpants, and like the soccer moms and like the people who I knew in my life. And when I started dressing, it was like, oh, you're always so fashionable, or oh, you're always so that, and it kind of goes back to that equilibrium that you were talking about,
Mhm.
earlier. And it kind of seems like it shifted that in a way, even though like mentally,
Mm,
like I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm better than, like I wasn't thinking that at all. But like I got the sense that because I started showing up in other clothes, that they were thinking that by the kind of comments that I got. And I just thought that was like really interesting.
Well, they felt like separate from you maybe
Maybe.
at when they saw you differently or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like kind of like birds of a feather flock together or something like that. And so it's like when you're showing up in a different way, you're sending signals that maybe you're stepping away from that group, even though you're not,
mm-hmm,
like in your
mm-hmm.
mind, you're not, but you're just like, for me, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for anybody else. And so,
Totally, totally.
um,
And what's interesting too is just how much of our personal stuff we bring to friendship. We'd like to think that it's a siloed thing, like, oh, I've got my friendships and then I've got my personal stuff I'm dealing with. It's all mixed up. And so if a person feels a lack of confidence about themselves and how
mhm,
they are received by the world and what they believe their bodies can wear or not, or whatever it is, And then here you come, and I'm projecting those things onto you.
Mhm.
It's going to be very hard for me to be in close relationship with others if I don't get some of my stuff worked out, because your shining in your clothing and how you show up in the world has nothing to do with me. It doesn't mean that there's less shine available to me, right?
Yeah.
But if I don't work through those things, it's very difficult to be in close relationship with people who have those kinds of blockages or complexes. And now you guys have had me thinking about how that stuff kind of plays out with fashion in a friend group, and the meaning that we assign to certain things, and just all of that's got me really thinking. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. I mean, because I think that there are like some, I'm not saying like all people who wear the leggings and the sweatpants. I'm not saying that at all. Because some of my like most favorite and interesting and awesome people in the world, they are not into fashion at all. And so I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that for some people, that this whole idea of being a mom and not having time for yourself, that you're spending all of your time on your kids and the house and everything, that you don't have any time or budget or anything for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a person steps out of that mindset and starts spending time, because I literally was like only buy clothes like at Costco, or like if it was like in the table next to the where the line was, like that's where I like, oh, I need jeans. There's a like I wouldn't even go into the inner sanctum of Costco fashion. like you know what I mean? Or like the same thing with Target, RIP. But like it just it like that's how I shop my clothes. And like then when I started doing something different, everything kind of shifted. And so like maybe like I'm just thinking maybe for somebody who is not there yet, that they're thinking like, oh, maybe should I be spending time on myself? Should I be caring for myself?
Mm, sure, sure. I could see all those things being activated, because from my place of lack, do I perceive a person shining? I mean, it can be the opposite way. It could be a person who is dressed very, very casually, very minimalistically, but she shines so brightly. I mean, she's got like just like a delicate gold hoop and jeans and a classic, pinstripe button down t-shirt or something. I don't know, or button down top, but she shines in it and she's comfortable in it. If I'm a maximalist, but I'm also kind of not totally sure about my choices, do I find myself jealous or uncomfortable with the fact that she is shining and so comfortable in such simplicity, and I feel a need to be maximalist to compensate for whatever? I mean, we all have these things going on, and
Yeah.
it's just so weird sometimes how friendships bring that stuff out. And I don't think that it's a contradiction. I don't think it's the whole, well, women are secretly jealous thing. I think it's I look at it from a sociological standpoint. I probably am comparing myself to the people who I see most often. And to some degree, comparing is normal. That's how I gauge what the social norms are. I go into a room and I see like, oh, this must not be okay here. I'm looking around to kind of gauge what's okay to say. So to some degree, I have to evaluate and observe society to know what's okay here, what's not, who's a friend, who's a foe. I have to observe and study others. And so with our friends, these are the people who I'm using as a measure of, am I progressing in life? Am I not? Is everybody going back to school or having children, or, and how are their kids doing? Well, my kids are kind of not doing as great at school, or her kids. So the closest people to me are the ones that I'm using as a measure of success, and I'm projecting in my mirror. And so it doesn't surprise me that this is probably the group where stuff is coming up. But I don't think that speaks to like a secret hateration or a secret whatever. I think it's just, it reflects the complicated nature of human relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, you never know what you like. Everybody is like, different. We're all the same, but we're all different. And like whatever somebody is, what they're struggling with, you never know. It could be maybe they were made fun of in school or something like that. You never know like what it could be, or maybe they just they maybe like they don't think they're creative, or maybe they don't think, maybe it's just, there's lots of different reasons, and they're all valid. It's just that it's interesting how it shows up in our relationships. And then to also like not take it personally, like it's just like it just, people are people and they have their own path. And so sometimes it's like it gels and sometimes it doesn't, but this doesn't make them any less of a person or you any more of a person.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we could talk about talk a little bit about the friendships, like common friendship challenges. You provide scripts for handling various friendship issues. So I would love to hear about like some of the most common pitfalls that women face in relationships, and how we can address them, and to see if I'm normal or not.
Yeah. Hey, same, same. Yeah. So in my book, Fighting for Our Friendships, the first half of the book kind of takes an aerial view at looking at the mechanics of women's friendships. So why do we fight the way we do? How do we bond the way we do? And all that good stuff. The second half of the book is divided into 9 little mini parts that show some of our most common conflicts. And they were divided into friend types. So like the clingy friends, the whatever friend. And I struggle with that because I'm like, I don't want to be reductive and I don't want it to feel like a Cosmo Girl magazine. But the idea is that at some point, we have all been that friend to someone. So the point I was making was about the experience of friendship. I know that I can say this very confidently. I know right now in my life, I have women who would say, man, Danielle's such a good friend. I also have women in my life who would say, I don't know. She could be doing better right now. I mean, and they're both talking about me because I'm showing up differently for different people and with what we've got going on, who I'm giving most attention to or whatever it is. And so there's a certain relativity about our experiences. So for example, the one I think of the types speaks to the friend who never gets back to you, the friend who's not reciprocal. She's not matching your energy in so many words. We could dismiss her as a bad friend and she's just a taker in this and that. Or we can kind of get curious and look at other things that might be going on. So each chapter breaks down what's going on. One of the top common issues is the friend who's not reciprocal. I hear it all the time. I'm always initiating. I'm always doing the calling. I'm over it. And so, a couple of things we can handle there, do to manage that. The first is you can take a look at the ways that people show up in friendship differently. I know this is not fun, but is it possible she is contributing to the friendship in her way? Most people are familiar with love languages. So that same general concept. Are you the person who's like formulating the plan, but she's always like, yes, let's go, let's do it, I'll pick you up? Or is she always remembering details about what you said about, your husband and your latest marriage? And she remembers, hey, I know you guys had counseling the other week. How'd it go? Right. So she's contributing in her way. Right. So the first is to try to attune your eyes to that. It might help take off some of the heat of the resentment you're feeling. The next thing you can do is you can invite her to participate in the way you want her to. You have permission. The trick is you want to package it as an invitation, not an accusation. I don't know many women who are going to respond well to, well, I feel like, I'm always the one calling you. I'm always the one. I'm not going to do well with that. Okay. And we don't want people saying, well, I guess I ought to show up because she gets mad if I don't. I don't want you being motivated by that. So I'm going to invite you because at the heart of it, I want more of your company, but that feels more vulnerable to say. So maybe after we go to brunch, we're in the parking lot talking about how great it was. And I say, hey, I know the last couple times, I came up with the plan of what we should do and things like that. And I'm sure you have your own ideas of things you want to do. So how about the next time you let me know? Let me know where you want to go, what thrift store you want to hit up. Like, I'll let you take the lead.
Mm-hmm.
It's my nice way of saying, girl, it's your turn. That's my subtext, but I'm inviting you. Hey, it's your turn next time. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
You would be surprised how many women tell me that they do not initiate with their friends because of their fear of rejection. Even with established friendships, it feels safer to let you do it. Or they'll say, well, I know you're so busy, so I just let you tell me. I'm letting you know you can participate now. You have permission. I won't reject you. Okay. So some of those things help us to solve this issue instead of thinking, should I cut her off? Because that's just so annoying. And putting on the story of, I guess she's just rejecting me and she doesn't have time for me and taking advantage. Let me be curious, right? Now, at the end of each chapter, we show a section that says how to know when it is time to let go. right? If I've asked you to hang out 9 times and half the times you cancel last minute or you're never available, or you know what? Maybe I don't cut you off, but I'm going to be a little more discerning about how I invest my time and energy and optimism here. I'm going to put my head on a swivel and look over here at these women who've been pursuing me for like 6 months. But I've been so fixated on this over here, you know? And so, how do I maneuver that without thinking I have to do an all or nothing kind of response? I would say that's probably one of the most common things I hear most consistently, but especially right now from women is dealing with a friend who's not reciprocal in her efforts has been really tough.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, not to make this about me, but I am that person who doesn't reach out. I'm that person because honestly, like I get, well, the rejection is, but it's, oh, I can't because like, or can we do it in like 3 months on a Friday afternoon? You know what I mean? Like the scheduling overwhelms me and I get
Sure.
like overwhelmed and then I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to do it. Like, sorry, never mind. Thank you. You know, and just like, but yeah, I think that for everybody communicates and contributes in their own way. And so giving them, and that's one of the things I really like about your book is that your book is not just read it from beginning to end. It's also very like, you can go through the table of content and like really kind of with precision go to what exactly you're struggling with, whether it be that friend that who doesn't get back or like if you should let go or you have your the way that you constructed the book. It really like it's like a manual almost. Like
Mm.
I mean I would call it like a manual in a sense, like to having good friendships or to working out your friendships.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, we want to. I know people are busy, so the idea of like them having to read chapters that build and build, we were like, scratch that. So I'm glad that it's been useful to women in that way. You know, I often heard women when we were first marketing the book say, "I don't know, my friendship was like really good. I don't think I need that." And I'm just like, okay, well, I'll see you in 5 months when you do. And it's not in a pessimistic way, but I mean, come on, think about how like you get a romantic partner and then your friends fade away and you're like, what the heck? And now suddenly I have issues that I didn't have a year ago. Or if I'm dealing with a chronic illness or something, or I mean, or I'm adopting new worldviews and suddenly I'm looking at people differently and it's kind of shifting the things I want to do with my friends or the things I want to talk about in friendships. So there's so much change happening and it's just we wanted to offer something so that no matter what season you're in, you have some kind of touchstone to help you have some language to describe, oh, this is what's going on with me. And I think I have some clarity about what to do about it. That was the hope.
Yeah, no, I mean, you absolutely nailed it there. I would have to say it. Like I really loved the book.
If it's okay, I would like to ask a
Yeah,
quick question. So,
ask
how
it.
like do you have any tips for recovering from a misstep in a friendship? Like, I'm thinking again, not to make it about me, but I recently started, well, a couple, maybe 2 years ago, I started teaching Pilates at a gym. It's my like other thing that I do. And so I met a lot of new people, like kind of all because I teach these group classes, and so I'm meeting and talking to a lot of different people, and I've become closer with some than others, and developed actual friendships with some of them. And there was one case where someone reached out to me and, took that next step, made themselves vulnerable and said, "Do you and your husband want to come have dinner at our place?" And I was excited. I was like, "Yeah, that sounds awesome." And then for whatever reason, like the scheduling kind of stalled and I never got back to her. And I didn't realize it until like a few weeks later that the ball was in my court and I totally dropped it. And when I revisited the issue, she was clearly a little bit like a little hurt and maybe thinking like, oh, well, maybe, maybe we aren't going to be friends because it was so early in the relationship that like, I feel like maybe I signaled that I'm not a very good potential friend. And
Mm.
so like when you make a misstep like that, especially when it's early in the relationship, like, do you have any tips for recovering? Hopefully that's not too specific.
No, I love that you're bringing up the issue of when we drop the ball and how do I make some kind of attempt at repair because that is going to happen. It's going to. And so I'm wondering if you could say what you just did to us. right now. I think a lot of times we chew on it and we're like, okay, how do I present this? And there's something about owning it. There's something about saying, hey, I was really excited to have dinner, the four of us, and things got so crazy that time went by. And before I knew it, I'm like, oh my gosh, we never set a date. I don't think I realized it was in my court. And the last thing I want to do is have you thinking that I was putting you off, because it's actually something I'm very much looking forward to. So I'm so sorry that that delay took longer than I thought, but I hope you still want to grab dinner, because I actually would really love that. That's the best you can do. And
Yeah.
the right people are going to, on it, in my opinion, find that endearing. The woman who can look you in the face and say, I got so caught up. But when I tell you, I'm so looking forward to the four of us getting together, I don't know how so much time passed, because I'm actually really looking forward to it. So please forgive me for that delay. It has nothing to do with a reflection on how, interested I am in getting to know you, because I very much want to do that. It's playful, it's light, it's not super dramatic. I'm so sorry. We want the apology to meet the magnitude of the infraction. So I think to be like, I'm so sorry and I don't want you to hate me, and that's, in my opinion, that's too much for the quote unquote violation. It's just, you know what? I'm so sorry. Time got away from me, but it in no way reflects how curious I am about you. And I would love to get together if you're still open to that. It's got a certain humility, and hopefully she feels good because you acknowledged it. And that's what most people want. They want to know, do I matter? Do you care? That's what they want to know. So even if there was a delay, you've just given that reassurance. You matter and I care. And if you're okay with it, I'd love to make that happen. And honestly, I think it will be very telling how she responds, because that's going to happen again. And not like a pessimist. If you guys get closer, that's going to happen again. So I'd be curious to see from the beginning if she shows some degree of understanding, forgiveness, compassion, and resilience. We can move on, you know? So I'd be curious to see how she responds.
Yeah.
You have to come back and give us all an update.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that this is being recorded, because now I have like a script. Go back
Yeah.
and like make sure I say the right thing.
Get the transcripts.
And
Yeah.
I'll let you know how it goes.
That's so cool. I mean, Amy, this has been such a great conversation. I mean, just like getting, yourself out there, and there's lots of different ways you can get yourself out there, whether it be through style, through connection, and then also like what to do like after you say hello, after you say, oh, those are a nice pair of shoes, or that, what happens like and how do you show up? And I think that this is all really important to think of, because it's not, I mean, the clothes are like, I always think of like the clothes are kind of like they don't necessarily open the doors, but they calm the hamster wheel and the circus in your mind enough to where you can hear, the door knocking, and so you can open it. You know what I mean? Like it's like, and I feel like in terms of like friendship, it's like having the perfect outfit is not going to get you all of the friends, but having a outfit who like knowing who you are and having an outfit that reflects who you are, and then also showing up in that energy is going to lead to friendships. And it sounds like, so I'm just like so happy that you were able to come and talk with us about that. And so how can people reach you, work with you, find you, anything? Yeah.
Yeah, everything lives at betterfemalefriendships.com. And we just want to be a space where we offer resources to women who are trying to figure out how to experience more satisfaction in their friendship landscape. And that looks different for everybody right now. It might be more satisfying to you to have more friends. It might be more satisfying to have skills to deal with conflict because you never learned them. So you find yourself getting really anxious whenever there's like awkwardness. So it might be helping you through a friendship breakup. So whatever would give you more satisfaction in your friendships, that's what we're here for. So betterfemalefriendships.com is where people can go. And I just want to thank you two for inviting me on. And I think it is so interesting, this intersection of fashion and style and friendship and connection is just so interesting. And so I know that I'll be chewing on this a lot. And I'm so glad that you are allowing me to come in and lend my voice to the conversation. So thank you for that.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
So great. Yeah,
Thank you for having
so
me.
much for joining us.
Thank you.